time, weather, and...
Hello and welcome to Driving with Todd. And I'm Todd. I received a comment the other day from my reaction to Cold Chisel doing the song K-San. What's interesting is every day I get 1 to 3 comments on that reaction, though I did that reaction months ago. So this song must resonate with a lot of people. It must take people back to the time of the Viet Nam War, when the war ended, and then how our soldiers returned to our countries and how they were treated. So I received this comment from a YouTuber that goes by the name of Scott Elf Verson. And Scott writes this: Todd, the title of the other war song was not 19. It is I Was Only 19 by Red Gum. And then Scott recommends a couple other Cold Chisel songs, which, we'll need to probably do in the future. Well, when I read that, it was like, I think I meant a different song. I meant 19. So I went back to my video and watched it through. And at the end of the song, I mentioned that the Cold Chisel song reminded or brought me back to memories of the song 19. Now, I didn't say who recorded it. I just said 19. Well, when I got this, it was like, oh yeah, that's right. Red Gum did a song called I Was Only 19. In fact, I did a reaction to it not long ago. And so there could be confusion between me just saying 19 and the group Red Gum with their song I Was Only 19. But what I was really referring to, and I wrote Scott this, I wrote him and I said, yeah, I was really referring to a song called 19 by Paul Hardcastle. Now, Paul Hardcastle recorded this song, released it in April of 1985. It was released as a single, and it was edited for the single, and then it was released as a longer version on his album called Paul Hardcastle. In the UK, this song reached number 1 on the UK singles chart for 5 weeks in a row. In the United States, it reached number 15 on Billboard's Hot 100 singles chart. And it went to number 1 in a lot of countries across the world, meaning that the Vietnam War not only affected Australia, New Zealand, and the United States, it affected the whole world and how we live today. So I'm thinking about this, and I'm going, I'm glad Scott brought this up, because I've been wanting to do a reaction to 19, and this would now give me a perfect opportunity, because I'm just wondering how many people have not heard this song. Now, it's not really a song. Paul Hardcastle does electronic music, and what Paul did was he used interviews, newscasts, other things of that nature to create this montage over electronic sounds. So it is really pretty cool. It's amazing that it was 5 weeks at number 1 in the UK, because it is a montage. But I think it's something that's very hypnotic. You start listening to it, and it takes you back to the 60s and the early 70s and the war in Vietnam, especially if you lived through it. And I lived through it. I wasn't in Vietnam, but I grew up through that era. So here we go with Paul Hardcastle doing the song 19.
In 1965, Vietnam seemed like just another foreign war, but it wasn't. It was different in many ways, and so were those who did the fighting. In World War II, the average age of the combat soldier was 26. In Vietnam, he was 19. 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 19.
The heaviest fighting of the past 2 weeks continued today, 25 miles northwest of Saigon.
I wasn't really sure what was going on.
19. In Vietnam, the combat soldier typically served a 12-month tour of duty, but was exposed to hostile fire almost every day. 19.
Okay, as I had mentioned, Paul Hardcastle is mostly electronic music. And I remember buying Rainforest, which was one of his early singles, and that was very electronic as well, with a lot of sounds of rainforest and stuff like that. So that's what he kind of does. He does electronic music, and then he overlays other sounds on top of it. And in this particular one, there's a person that's sort of telling the story of Vietnam and the soldier that fought in Vietnam, and then threw in. We haven't really gotten to any interviews yet, but threw in interviews and then newscasts, as we saw one of the newscasts, and it's very, it's very enlightening to learn about that war in this sense, as the person that's talking throughout the video mentions that in World War II the average soldier's age was 26, so they were more of an adult. In Vietnam, they were 19. I mean, these people were just coming right out of high school, being drafted, or in a lot of cases, they volunteered as well. They just felt, okay, we're fighting for a greater cause, and wanted to go and fight in Vietnam. But either way, that average age was 19. And that's just amazing, because they were just very young people. They, didn't really experience any life at that time. They were like high school to a war. Just kind of interesting the way they're portraying this. And then they mentioned that the average soldier time in Vietnam was 1 year, which is a long time, especially when you're fighting, as they mentioned, nearly every day. So let's keep on going, see where this goes.
In Saigon, a U.S. military spokesman said today more than 700 enemy troops were killed last week in that sensitive border area. Throughout all of South Vietnam, the enemy lost a total of 2,689 soldiers.
Vietnam combat veterans suffer from what psychiatrists call post-traumatic stress disorder. Many vets complain of alienation, rage, or guilt. Some succumb to suicidal thoughts. 8 to 10 years after coming home, almost 800,000 men are still fighting the Vietnam War.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting in itself, the amount of soldiers that had that syndrome and just couldn't get past the war. That to me is just amazing. And I don't know if we had that same thing after World War II or Korea. Nobody really talks about it. But I think what we saw in the 70s, as that war de-escalated and troops were coming back, there was more sense of being able to see what was going on, because everybody had televisions, radio, and so things were available to us that weren't available at the end of World War II, or even at the end of the Korean War. And I think one of the things that I remember as a young person in the 60s is that we had, I think, news in the morning. It was, I think, between 5:30 and 6:30 a.m. in the morning. Now we were Central Time, because this is Wisconsin, and then you'd have news at noon and for an hour, and you'd have local news and then international news, and then at 5:30 you would have local news again, and at 6 o'clock you'd have international news. So our evening meal was at 6 o'clock. If you had the TV on, what you were seeing was the war in Vietnam. So this is the first war that was actually televised, and people could watch it in their living room. Not making it like that's a great thing, but it was the first time that people realized what war was really about. And I think that's one of the things that caused a lot of the protests that went through our country and many other countries in the late 60s, is being able to actually see what was going on. Let's keep on going.
Thoughts. 8 to 10 years after coming home, almost 800,000 men are still fighting the Vietnam War. None of them received the hero's welcome.
Very powerful, very powerful. I liked it at the end where the young man was saying, I wasn't sure what was even going on. You know, what was the war about? What were we fighting for? Just very telling, very telling. And like I said, there's an extended version on the LP, which is, I think, over 6 minutes long, and it continues with that funk beat. You have the background singers. I like those female background singers that were singing 19, and then all of the radio broadcasts and so on. Just really an interesting way of approaching the war in Vietnam and how it affected so many young men. He said 10 years after the war was over 800,000 men had the syndrome that they're talking about. Just unbelievable. I mean, it's just unbelievable that they couldn't. It was so hard to get past. So there had to have been a lot of horrible things going on there as well. I remember I had a boss where I worked. I had him for about 3.5 years, and he was an interpreter in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. And he would tell me that he had foot rot. Basically, he had really bad feet. You could see the way he walked that he had bad feet. And one of the reasons was it's so humid over there. There was so much rain over there that your boots would just basically rot off your feet because they would never dry out. And you wouldn't get a new pair of boots until the ones you had pretty much weren't there anymore. And so those types of things had to affect people psychologically. And it was something that our American soldiers and our Australian soldiers and our New Zealand soldiers, who, average age of 19, had never experienced anything like this before. We had it really good in the 50s and the 60s, at least here in the United States we did. And to go over to a country that we really didn't know why we were fighting in and experience all these things that we never experienced is just telling, and it just affected so many people. So this is really cool. I wanted to play this. I've been wanting to do this one for quite a while, and this was a perfect opportunity when Scott wrote and sent me his comment. It was like, yeah, I'm going to do this song, and so that now I've done 3 songs about Vietnam, and they're all, well, I also did the Green Beret, so you could almost say 4 songs about Vietnam. And they're all a little bit different, all taking a little bit different look at that war. So I hope you appreciated this. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope maybe you learned something from it, because I think it's also can teach us about that particular war. If you liked it, hit that like button. That'd be really appreciated. Now, if you have any comments about Paul Hardcastle doing the song 19, put in the comments below. That'd be really appreciated. I'm also going to take a link to this video and put it in my description below. So if you want to watch it again, just hit that link. It'll open up and play, and I won't be stopping it. I'm also going to put a link to the channel that uploaded this particular video. If you really got into this, you might want to check out the, there's actually 2 longer versions of this. There's one from the album, and then there's a remix. I think it's called the Destruction Mix. That is like 7.5 minutes long. So, take a look at those, see what they added into it. I think you'll be in awe as you watch those particular videos as well. Now, have you subscribed to Driving with Todd? If you haven't, why don't you do so right now? Go below this video and hit subscribe. You'll be making me very happy. If you go over here, ring the bell, you'll get updates to my latest videos. So, like I said, when I got that comment from Scott, I was thinking, well, maybe a lot of people haven't heard about this song. That was back in 1985. Let's do it so that we've done another song about Vietnam and people can compare that to the other songs that we've done on Vietnam. So I want to say this put a smile on my face, but I'm really not going to do that. I think it made me reflect back to when I was younger in the 60s and what I saw myself as the fighting in Vietnam occurred. So I'm hoping maybe it puts some thoughts into your mind as well. And hey, we can only hope for peace. Peace out.